Well, a few minutes late, but glad you're along. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Steakhouse on a Wednesday. Hope you're doing well. I actually dropped my earbud there. Put that back in. Got it when your equipment kind of falls out of your ear and that kind of thing. Glad you're along. Hope you're doing well. Hope things are well. You know the drill. You're hearing me. It means a thumbs up. Let's just check in and make sure we are being heard. A few minutes late, as I mentioned, but we got a loaded show. I mean this may be if we're this is the last regular season show of the year. So if that's the case, we got one loaded for you. And let's just kind of pull up here and make sure that we are on the air. And I think that we are. Hey, time to roll the open, right? Let's roll that open. And I think we're going to be okay today. I just have a feeling that today we're going to be okay. Let's roll it open in 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Glad you guys are along on the Steakhouse. Here we go. Glad you guys are along on. We got through it. How about that? The Open did not disappoint us there. How about that? That was good. That's a good sign when we finally got the kinks out there. Glad you guys are along the Steakhouse. Welcome. My name's Dan Vaughn, voice of the Kansas City T-Bones, and we've got a big one for you. We got not one but two guests coming to you here. We're now past we're in the lunch hour now, so it's kind of fitting. Sit back, relax. Got the tablecloths out. You got your favorite beverage out for you. Maybe it's a coffee, a tea, knives and forks ready to go. On the menu board today, which is, if you see our post on Facebook, you see I put the today's special up. It's kind of like walking into your favorite place. And maybe not, I guess your favorite steakhouse has a special, right? They always do, right? Well, on our chalkboard special today, we've got coming up in the second half hour, Dylan Tice, Milwaukee Milkman, or is he? We'll answer that question, but we'll talk to Dylan Tice about the Milwaukee Milkmen and their American Association Championship, which they clinched last week. And then on the opening segment, we're going to have Kevin Lucco, the one and only Kevin, along with he won't be joined with Rob, but Rob Prenier and him both with This Week in the American Association. Kevin probably saw, I think it's safe to say, outside of maybe umpires, obviously the broadcasters, the players, but outside of umpires, players, broadcasters, he saw as much of the American Association this year and was at the finals last week. So he'll stop by and have a chat about that and about the league in general. I think he's very dialed into what's going on in the league. Also, as always, your questions and comments, we always got that for you. But we're going to start off Wednesday's Wisdom today. And I didn't even load the system here, which I was so excited because the open went so swimmingly today that I didn't even put that in there. But let's do that. Let's go ahead and I thought, since we're heading into the off season, we're heading into what I've like to call, and you guys have heard me say this several times, I've talked about the hot stove. What is the hot stove? I often I've realized that maybe I know most of my North American audience will know what the hot stove is, I think. And then I started thinking, I use that term so much, even in Australia, even in North America, maybe folks don't really know what the hot stove is. And I thought today's Wednesday's Wisdom, we would kind of give you guys, as we move into the Hot Stove League, which the Hot Stove League's already busy, what is the origin of the term hot stove? Because if you're a baseball fan, maybe a hockey fan, you've heard the term hot stove mentioned now and then, and I always made me wonder, what was the origin of that? I didn't even know. So, by the way, your questions and comments throughout the broadcast as well. Glad you guys are along. In the early days of baseball, we see a mom out there, always kind of my mom out there for sure. Uh, hot stove refer to the actual was not the actual baseball season, and still not. Although the hot stove could be carried over into, well, it kind of heats up near the trade time. Sometimes the first, few weeks of the season. I guess the hot stove could kind of hot stove any time when you make a trade, but in general, the hot stove is the all-encompassing term for the baseball season in the wintertime, when the off season, basically what it is. And I put a couple pictures up here. Here's one. Here's a cartoon. This one goes back, I believe, this one here dates to, I believe, around the early. This is around 1913, I believe. And you can see right there, this is a cartoon that was made. There's a baseball fan. He's sitting there next. Let me pull the graphic down so you can see it. You see the baseball fan. He's the guy on the left. That's BBFAN. The guy with his hands out. He's on the left of your screen, hat on, hands out, kind of warming his hands. And the hot stove says, "Oh, that ought to produce some hot air." And you've got the two gentlemen walking in, dressed in suits of the time. The derbies and that look from the turn of the last century. One says American League meetings. He's got a wrapped up. Well, it's actually not wrapped up. It's just pieces of wood. It says American League meetings. The other one says trade talk and managerial changes. And that's what's on that. I don't know if you guys can see that on the screen, but there's an idea of what that is. And that's cartoon number one. The other photo I want to show you guys, this is one from around the same time. And this was a photo, obviously a photo op that was staged as well. Let me see if I can put this up on the screen for you guys as well. You can see that. You can see these are Red Sox players sitting around. One of them's got a lumber in his hand. He's going to put some hot, but going to put some lumber into the stove there. You got some players sitting around. What looks like maybe a baseball executive in his overall, or not his overall. He's got his suspenders on, and the players are sitting around, staying warm around the hot stove. So a couple of visuals there to give you. But according to the Dickinson Baseball Encyclopedia, one of my properties downstairs, the first occurrence of the hot stove was actually in 1908 is when this happened. First use in 1908 that the New York Giants will win the hot stove, the fans getting something to talk about when the hot stove league opens this season. And apparently the Giants have maybe not done so well the previous year, but the Sporting Life in September 19th of 1908 says the situation was better for the fans because it looked like the Giants could win the hot stove off season. So that's the first use of the hot stove. And what it references is really back in the day. Let's go back before radio. When newspaper was your best way to get your information, you would gather around either the town crier, obviously was the original hot stove, but oftentimes folks in small towns, even rural communities, even big cities, would go to the local watering hole, the local Five and Dime, the local supply store, whatever it is, and there'd be a stove in the middle, and they'd all sit around the hot stove, have a cup of coffee, put some wood on the fire, and talk about the events, maybe talk about politics and talk about whatever was going on in society. That's thus the term hot stove. It's what people would do. They would sit around in the wintertime and discuss, hopefully we have a good spring, we'll have a good crop, or hopefully the election goes our way, or whatever the case may be. That's the original visual, is that folks in the wintertime, especially in northern climes, would sit around the hot stove, warm themselves with talks of better days or good days, or maybe it was in this case, when we're talking about baseball, talking about better days ahead when the spring and summer come. So that's the whole term of hot stove. And I did not realize. I just kind of thought my thought was it threw wood in the fire. You throw wood on the hot stove fire. Let me give you another shot of that one again too here. I just kind of thought you were throwing wood on the stove. You kind of, baseball was the wood, and it kind of burned and got people all excited. Yes and no. The wood was to keep the engine burning, to keep you guys excited about the game, keep you guys in tune with your ball club, and you threw that hot stove wood on there. Player trades, manager signings, comings and goings of the rosters around the league. Who looks better this time of year than others? And that's where it all came from. But that goes back to the turn of the last previous 2 centuries when folks in communities all across the country would sit around, warm their hands by the winter fire, chat about the day, and also, oh, by the way, the hot stove baseball league, which also in hockey is there's actually a television and radio program in hockey that's for years has also been called the hot stove. So it goes back. A couple of things too. There were, you see the cartoon there. That was actually that one came out of the Spokane Washington Press back in 1909 is when that one was. But it was interesting to see just some of the notes I dug up on this whole thing that the hot stove really had more of a meaning than I realized. I mean, I realized it was a symbol, but there's certain things in baseball you kind of just, I kind of know that. I know that term means hot stove in baseball, but in reality, it is the hot stove. And I want to close with this here. And actually, you know what? I'm going to table this. You know what? I'll read it now. Why not, right? I'll read it now because I got something else for you guys to close with. Okay, here is this poem that was published in 1910 in the Washington, D.C. Sunday Star, and it's called the Hot Stove League. And it closes with these lines, and I'll read these lines to you. I've read these poems before to you guys, but here are the lines here. Let me read this to you. Let me kind of pull this up so you guys can get a better look at my face here. What if the plays are built of smoke and laughed to scorn by men? They have to but light their pipe to play them or again. There are no dubs in the Hot Stove League. Every guy is a star, by Jove. I'm not sure who Jove is. For every galoot slams the ball and snoot around the old hot stove, I'll let them play their games and dreams with never a fault or bull. With one hand grabs of double plays and home runs with bases full. But what a corking team we'd have if we signed every cove. And they'd all play ball all like they do in the fall around the old hot stove. Thus, the hot stove was something you always win. So back in the 1900s, the fans were the same way they are now. You always look great on paper in November, December, and on to January, February, March. Maybe not so good in July and August, but the hot stove, you're always a winner as hope springs eternal the spring. But a couple of cool things there. And just, again, a hot stove could be politics, weather, but in general, it talks about the hot stove of baseball. But that's where the first mentions and also the origins of the hot stove. That's today's Wednesday's Wisdom here on the show. Glad you're along on the Steakhouse. Glad you're here. Had such a stove in my early years. Although, yes, and that's the thing. That stove you're seeing there, that stove you see, that's what everybody had. I mean, back in the day, that's what folks had to keep themselves warm. That's what warmed your whole house. And my mother grew up on her first home was when I say this, picture a old painting of a one-room wooden cabin. That's basically what it was. Where she grew up in West Texas back in the turn, not the turn, had been the middle, born in 1940, so it had been, but still, even back then, even folks in the rural parts of the country didn't have AC and central heat and air. They had the hot stove to keep them warm. So all good. Thanks, Bob, for that contribution. Glad you guys are along. Hope you enjoyed Wednesday's Wisdom. Let's see here. We're done. The association season is done. And off the top, first off, congratulations to the entire American Association. I said it 2 weeks ago in our last show. The little engine that could, whatever you want to call it, I couldn't be prouder. And believe me, people notice around the world just what the American Association did. Yes, Major League Baseball's kind of settled down a bit, but they've had more issues, left and right with COVID. The American Association pulled it out with only really one COVID out. We're going to hear from Dylan Tice in the second half hour. He's going to really tell us a bit more about some of those precautions, well, really just how it went for them. This was a challenging season for a lot of folks, but I couldn't be happier for the entire American Association of family. And not just Milwaukee winning it all and Sioux Falls being in the postseason, but every ownership group, every front office, every person involved with this thing, including both Josh Richab and Josh Buchholz. Big tip of the cap for those guys. I mean, everybody along the way, big things doing. I mean, this is one of those things you're going to look back as a player, broadcaster, fan, whatever, and say, I remember that. And a lot of folks really battled this summer. I mean, for guys like me who really sat at home and battled from a distance, it wasn't probably as hard of a grind, although maybe it was an emotional grind for folks like me and fans like you who didn't get our T-bones fixed this year. But for guys, I think of Steve Schuster, who was away from home the entire summer, did not cross the back to the Winnipeg to go back to his own bed, was basically packed all summer. But look at guys like Kevin Lucco will join us in a moment, who was there the entire way to really see this thing through. And just overall, just a lot of folks along the way. I mean, I can think of all the broadcasters, media folks, content producers. It was a labor at times this summer, but they got through it, and I'm very, very happy and very proud of the American Association. Okay, as promised, let's get this graphic off the board here too. Here's a little producing on the fly. Steakhouse continues on your Wednesday, our final regular season show until we go to off-season mode. And granted, this show usually doesn't air during the season because usually it's our T-Bones pregame live, T-Bones postgame live. And we also air our Cup of Sizzle during the daytime, our award-winning, the groundbreaking Cup of Sizzle that started it all so many years ago. Well, a couple of years ago, actually. But that's what we usually do. And then we usually open the steakhouse in the off-season. We kept this thing going all season. So anyway, quickly also, Donna says, with the small amount of ejections this season, including the first one for a coach not wearing a mask on the mound, does that reflect how good? I think yes. I think yes. It's very interesting. I probably watched more streaming video of baseball than I've ever watched. And that includes Australia. When I'm working in a winter ball in Australia, oftentimes I spend a half season home and go a second half season over. So I watch a lot of Perth games, especially. I was watching at least some portion of a game every night in some long stretches. And I don't recall but the one incident where someone was ejected like that. And yeah, I think that speaks. And I thought too, the umpires had a very big task at hand because not only they umpire the game and try to keep this thing between the navigational buoys, so to speak, and keep players in line, calling balls and strikes, making sure the rules are applied properly. And that's a tough gig. I mean, umpiring and a gig for everybody. But to pull that off with also the protocols, all those things involved, I thought they did a great job. I didn't see, but maybe a couple of times this year there was some border. But you can say that in any ball game, you're going to say that was a close call. These guys they're human. They're going to make mistakes. But I think overall, I would say, yeah, it's an A. A definite A to an A+ for the umpire crews this year. I didn't hear a lot of talk amongst broadcasters. I didn't hear much talk about fans, and I think that's a big thumbs up to the entire association. All right, appreciate that very much, Don, as well. I know you guys are busy with this whole thing as well. Okay, I'm going to see Jeff Miller time out there as well. As mentioned, Kevin Lucco from This Week in the American Association, he saw as much baseball as anybody that wasn't a player, umpire, or maybe a front office, because he was I think he made every stop. I think he made every stop in the association this year, and he multiple stops in his Sioux Falls. So he definitely saw that, and also his hometown team there in St. Paul. But Kevin, good enough to kind of join us on the Steakhouse on a Wednesday as we roll right along. Glad you guys are along. Take it away, Kevin Lucco, our first feature guest. Got some new bells and whistles. Hope you guys enjoy it right here on the Steakhouse on a Wednesday on Facebook Live and YouTube Live.
Be strong.
Well, as promised here on the Steakhouse, as we wrap up the American Association season, and what has been a crazy season, a guy who's seen a lot of it and been on the road from This Week in the American Association, Kevin Lucco. And Kevin, first off, take a deep breath. Season's over. Are you going to be able to decompress now? Because you've been a busy man.
I don't know what to do with myself. For the last 2 months, I was in a routine. If I wasn't at a ballpark, I was watching games on American Association Baseball TV. I don't know what to do with myself right now. I'm going to drive my wife nuts again.
Yeah, my wife wanted to kick me out back in May, so I got you because obviously we didn't play. Let's jump into the headline. Milwaukee wins the shortened season. Uh, I don't think it was a huge surprise. I think a lot of folks thought the teams were pretty evenly matched, but I think in this league of super teams, they were all six super teams, some really good ball clubs out there. I don't think this is a real big shocker. Milwaukee pretty much from August 1 was the best club in the league, depth-wise, bullpen-wise, matchup-wise, offense. I mean, they don't do a lot of things. They do a lot of things good. They may not stand out in one area, except for starting pitching in their bullpen. No shocker here, was there?
No, I don't think so. To me, for Milwaukee to win the series, it was a matter of the pitchers doing what they had been doing all season, and to have a few of the guys that were having some subpar seasons at the plate to get the job done and get them enough run support. And as we saw, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, they took the series 3-1. I was glad to see Sioux Falls get a win, and it would have been nice to. I think it would have been nice for all the fans involved to go as long as it could, because the league did go. We're going to go 7 games if they could, but I just think that over the course of the 7 games, 5 games, whatever doesn't make a difference. Milwaukee was the better club, but Sioux Falls has got nothing to hang their hat about. I mean, their heads about.
Be strong.
Well, as promised here on the Steakhouse, as we wrap up the American Association season, and what has been a crazy season, a guy who's seen a lot of it and been on the road from this week in the American Association, Kevin Lucco. And Kevin, first off, take a deep breath. Season's over. Are you going to be able to decompress now? Because you've been a busy man.
I don't know what to do with myself. For the last 2 months, I was in a routine. If I wasn't at a ballpark, I was watching games on American Association Baseball TV. I don't know what to do with myself right now. I'm going to drive my wife nuts again.
Yeah, my wife wanted to kick me out back in May, so I got you because we didn't play. Let's jump into the headline. Milwaukee wins the shortened season. I don't think it was a huge surprise. I think a lot of folks thought the teams were pretty evenly matched, but I think in this league of super teams, they were all 6 super teams, some really good ball clubs out there. I don't think this is a real big shocker. Milwaukee pretty much from August 1 was the best club in the league, depth-wise, bullpen-wise, matchup-wise, offense. I mean, they don't do a lot of things. They do a lot of things good. They may not stand out in one area, except for starting pitching in their bullpen. No shocker here, was there?
No, I don't think so. To me, for Milwaukee to win the series, it was a matter of the pitchers doing what they had been doing all season, and to have a few of the guys that were having some subpar seasons at the plate to get the job done and get them enough run support. And as we saw, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, they took the series 3-1. I was glad to see Sioux Falls get a win, and it would have been nice to. I think it would have been nice for all the fans involved to go as long as it could, because the league did go. We're going to go 7 games if they could, but I just think that over the course of the 7 games, 5 games, whatever doesn't make a difference. Milwaukee was the better club, but Sioux Falls has got nothing to hang their hat about. I mean, their heads about. That was a pretty good ball club in their dugout too. They're just a little short. And I think you mentioned it to me. We were kind of texting back and forth. Certain situations, maybe it was where their offense stood out. Their matchups in the bullpen maybe came a little deficient late in the series.
Right, and yeah, with Sioux Falls, the middle of the order produced just fine, but top of the order, Logan Lannon had been a table setter all season, and he maybe had 2, possibly 3 hits the entire series. The bottom of the order gave them nothing, and they just did not have an answer for the Milwaukee pitching.
Yeah, it really was a depth thing. I mean, the Canaries, again, nothing to hang their heads about. But overall, I said this, and I had when I had Tom Wynn on, and sometimes it's not a player addition; it's what that player does to adjust the lineup card. And what I'm going with this is Jose Sermo. He didn't put up MVP numbers, and he was pretty quiet most of the way. But it seemed like once they added him, and it basically just made their lineup that much deeper and that much more dangerous. When you had a guy like, got guys at the top like Tyson Davis who are getting on base. You got your Nerias of the world, and of course Adam Brett Walker was your league MVP. It just kind of just gave them one more piece and created some depth. I don't know if it was so much the Sermo factor, but it stretched their lineup card out. How did you see that? Was that the final piece of the puzzle? Not so much Jose, but just, okay, this club's so deep, tough to beat.
Yeah, I think even with Sermo's struggles, opposing managers had to have that seed in the back of their head that there was a guy in their lineup that could hurt you if you pitched to him. So I think it helped out. It gave extra protection for Adam Brett Walker, and it also probably gave David Washington some better pitches to swing at, as we saw in Game 5. He had a big game.
Yeah, and again, depth is huge there for them. What was the atmosphere like? You were there, the clincher. I know it's really weird when a team wins on the road, because the home fans are kind of like, well, that's it, and you sort of clap for the. But what was the atmosphere like overall in the games you saw in the postseason there in Sioux Falls?
It was pretty lively for games 3 and Game 4, but it seemed like, as we were chatting back and forth this last night, it's just a Game 5 when you only got 24 hours to try to sell tickets for it. You get the diehards and not much more. But, the people that were there were engaged, and Milwaukee had a pretty decent turnout at the ballpark, too. A lot of the Pulse parents came over from Milwaukee to support the team. So, both sides had their backing, and so it kind of made for, it was a sparse crowd, but the people that were there, they were into the game.
Kevin Lucco with you. Dan Vaughn here on the Steakhouse, talking a little association wrap-up. We're kind of wrapping the whole thing up and putting it away for the to dry dock for the winter, or fall than the winter. The host families, the atmosphere, it seemed like, and you made the trip to Milwaukee. We've talked about this a little bit off the air, and we talked about it on another show, too, on my other show. The Milkmen seemed to sort of, in their expansion club, and had, the short season last year away. They didn't get a chance to play a lot of games. Then this year, this COVID mess. But they seem to have taken to this league pretty nicely, from marketing, social, in-game performance, on-field performance. This is a pretty good little operation. You saw them firsthand, what they've got there in Milwaukee as an overall organization. Boy, this just makes the league that much better, doesn't it?
Yeah, Michael Zimmerman and his crew with Rock Ventures, they've gone all in on American Association baseball, and I know a lot of us were leery at first when they decided they're going to place a team in Milwaukee. We thought, well, that's right in the heart of Northwoods League country. Is this going to be a thing where they play for maybe a year or two and decide, hey, we don't want to pay these player salaries, and why don't we just play against Madison and Manitowoc or Kenosha? But
right.
But Michael Zimmerman, he's all in on this, and he's got a beautiful ballpark there, a nice setup with. He's got a drive-in theater behind the ballpark and an umbrella bar out beyond. So
I love that.
He's in the long haul.
I love that. I love what they've done, and it's funny because I've not been there, but I can just tell you from my conversations with executives in the Australian Baseball League, how much, because I'm often referencing obviously Kansas City, what we do in T-Bone land, and you're really close to St. Paul. I'm always referencing St. Paul, but suddenly I find myself referencing, oh, and by the way, Milwaukee does this, and oh, by the way, Milwaukee does that. And again, it's something that I think Sean Aronson said before. I know the league believes this, but Sean, the broadcaster of the St. Paul Saints, this league is only as strong as its weakest link. That in the more teams that are doing the pop-up bars, the drive-ins, the show they put on, the more teams doing that, this league's only going to get better, especially with the expansion looming. It has to excite the fandom. I know you're excited about it.
Yeah, Milwaukee has become one of my favorite stops, and it's generally been established already that, like, the in between inning promotions with Fireman Jim and Van McNeil. It's they're probably next to St. Paul as far as having the best in-game entertainment, and
by far.
that's quite a feather in their cap for a team that's only in their second year. But we had Zimmerman and Anthony Barone and Dan Kenzie on with us on this week of the association during the off season, and one thing they stressed to us is that they wanted to create a culture there on the field, off the field, and they took a lot of big steps in doing that this year. Obviously, winning a championship. I mean, how can you establish a better culture than that?
Right. Yeah, I mean, winning solves a lot of ills. It's something that I can tell you personally. When Brisbane in the Australian Baseball League in Perth in the West, when they're winning Claxton Shields over there, it does cover some warts. But then you also put on a great show. It just makes you that much tougher on those. And that's what St. Paul's done. I mean, St. Paul didn't win it this year, but when they and I want to ask you that to transition to that. It was weird seeing St. Paul with the limited numbers, but the show went on, and I have nothing but respect because it's been very easy, I think, for the St. Paul Saints to say, you know what, well, we can't put 8,000 people in here, so let's cut this thing back. But the show looked, from what I saw, and I watched a lot of the games on the association site, the show went on, and it was a damn good show.
Right. They didn't have like the entire entertainment staff, but there were, I don't know, about half of what they usually have. And obviously, with the restrictions that Minnesota has on attendance, there was fewer people there to be entertained, so you didn't need to have like a 10-man entertainment staff.
Sure.
But the ones that are there, yeah, the promotions went on, the on-field stuff went on. It was as close as you could get to a normal Saints game night, except that there wasn't 8,000 people.
Voice here in Kevin Luco with This Week in the American Association. I had to take sure I typed it in, so I just abbreviated it. But he and Rob Pinnier do a phenomenal job of covering our league. These are two guys, and I've talked about this often, who they have sort of, I mean, well, you've got skin in the game. You love St. Paul, but you also love the league. You guys just labor this thing, and I have nothing but respect for what you guys do covering the league. And Kevin saw more of the association, I think, probably besides the broadcasters this year than anybody. You made a lot of road trips. On your road trips this year, what stood out to you from the American Association overall? What was the one thing you think back, if you had to write a book and maybe a title of a book for this experience that was 2020, what were the things that stand out to you, be it from all your travels and seeing, because you saw pretty much everybody?
It was a different vibe. With all the safety measures put into place, at times it was a little confusing. You walk into the ballpark, do I have to have a mask on? Can I go to this area? If I'm upstairs, do I have to have a mask on? Do I have to have it on when I'm drinking something? It just, you didn't want to be that one guy that everybody's looking at like, okay, how come he's not coming? So, and I think others were kind of confused with it too. So, half the time, if I'm upstairs, I'm kind of looking around like, okay, what's everyone else doing up here? So I know on my part, I opted often to just head downstairs and sit with the crowd. And I think for myself, that was a different experience because I think I've gotten a little too comfortable with being upstairs in the press box, where I kind of want to be within the crowd and see you get a better feel for the
Sure.
atmosphere of the park when you're right in the middle of all of it. So that was the big thing for me this year, was just kind of just feel like I am Joe fan at the game again.
2020, the books. Okay, this is one of the questions I saw. I actually saw a tweet from Steve Schuster, and he was talking about this. And I love these hypothetical questions. There's never really a right or wrong answer here, and I don't know if we'll ever find out for sure. But was that Milwaukee team, if they come back next year, let's just, obviously that's not going to be the case because players returning to their old clubs, things of that nature. But as that roster is constructed, a normal 12-team league where they won 65 games, that super team, were they that good?
They were that good, yeah, talent-wise. But like you said, you're not going to see a team like that again because of way we are with the amount of veterans we can have and the
Right.
different salary cap that would be in place. A lot of those guys, I think, are going to be heading back to Mexico or the Atlantic
Sure.
League to play next year. So,
Yeah.
we may never see a starting rotation like we saw with Milwaukee again. So it
Sure.
was fun just to watch and appreciate that while we could.
Sure, those super teams like that. If you've not noticed, you guys have been watching the transaction where you've seen all the teams have been shipping those guys back, previous trades where they went the whole team, what have you. So some of those folks looking at a couple of not just of course the T-Bones, we've kind of joked around called the Milk Bones, but the T-Bones connections, Dylan Tice. Of course, Mason Davis, the former T-Bone, Dylan Baker, was on the T-Bone roster this year. Adam Brett Walker, of course, played with the T-Bones 2 years ago. Part of a really good story, which I think I've shared a couple of times. Part of it when the T-Bones lost 3 players in a weekend to affiliated ball on the opening weekend. One of the players didn't even get off the bus on the opening start. So when Joe had you have to plug those places in, and of course Christian Correa. You start looking at those guys, a lot of connections, and those guys will be heading back. Cleburne also. With Zach Nerrier and Logan Trowbridge, but Nerrier the MVP. I would think, and I don't know you've talked to many of the other organization guys, the Steve Montgomerys of the world in Sioux City, but I'm assuming those guys are chopping at the bit to get those players back, I would think.
Yeah, if you listen to Rob's latest show, Mountain Talk with Steve Montgomery, Steve talked extensively how all summer he watched games throughout the league. And I thought it was kind of an interesting point that Steve made, along with watching his players that he's going to be getting back. He also did a bit of a study on the North Division teams, such as, okay, one out,
Sure.
guys, are they hitting running here? He's kind of keeping track of what they're doing situationally so that when they play against the North next year, he's going to go back in those notes and try to get him a bit of a scouting report. So
That's very interesting, and I need to check that out. And by the way, if you guys, let me put that on the screen for you too. This week in the American, maybe we'll just this week in the association. It's there it is. This week in the it's actually this week in the American Association. But I couldn't fit the whole thing on there. But you guys drop now. You're going to go into your off-season mode, but you guys drop that podcast, and of course he does. Rob, your partner, is doing podcasts for like what 3 or 4 different teams, something like that. But that's up on it. Where can they find that? I guess because I'd love to have people check that out when they're done with our show.
Well, you can go to minorleaguesportsreport.com and Rob will have all of those podcasts listed in his website. What I personally do, I have Podbean on my phone. I click on that and I'll do a search for Minor League Sports Report. And then all the podcasts, including This Week in Association, everything that Rob does pops up on there, and it just makes it for easily. You can navigate through that to get to whatever show you'd like to listen to.
There you go, right there. Just kind of a couple little odds and ends. I am impressed, and I because of when this whole thing started, the Major League Baseball it was a mess, and so you're thinking if Major League Baseball can't get off the ground, how's the Little American Association going to fight through this and dodge all the naysayers, the haymakers, the COVID situation? But they did. Only one COVID out. I think it's a phenomenal, inspirational story. I've tweeted that. What the league did, the owners, I mean, all the ball clubs involved. Is this a sports story that maybe should be told a little bit more? I don't think anybody's talking about it, but this little league pulled it off, and I got to say, an A+. I mean, are you kind of shocked that no one's talking about it, or just because it's minor league sport? But it's a huge story, I think.
Yeah, I think because it's an independent league sport, maybe it flies under the radar a bit, but I see it as it could be a prototype for a lot of the other minor leagues to look at when it comes to trying to open up their seasons, whether it be indoor soccer,
Sure,
hockey, go to next spring and you got indoor football. So, it'd be Josh Schaub kind of set the bar for what teams need to do to get through a season. But yeah, there were naysayers out there. There's a independent baseball podcast out east that mostly focuses on the Eastern teams, but they're dabbling a lot with association this year. And I can remember their host saying, "Well, there's no way they should have games where every fan should have to wear a mask." And I just thought, wow, people aren't going to want to go to the ballpark and feel like they're being governed. They want freedom to do what they want, wear a mask, don't wear a mask, but get to enjoy baseball. So, what I say, both missions were accomplished. So the games got in, the fans were able to enjoy without being over governed. So,
Right, right. Well, it was a great year, and we could go on and on. And I keep saying this, and we need to work this out because I've talked about this a couple of years ago. But on our radio broadcast, I need to get you and Rob rotating every week and get you guys on the pregame because it's now I can do that a lot easier with that thought. Looking to 2021, assuming everything is all capiche and we go forward, we don't have any teams. Every team survives. Do you have an early? I mean, there we go. Sorry about that. I was kind of doing a couple things there. Sorry about that. Hope you guys enjoyed back here. Loco there of this week. I messaged Kevin because that was actually on tape, but I want to get to that because I did see that this morning overnight, and the Greers brought up a really good question. And I think there's probably two answers. And I'm going to see if I can put the quote up. I've got the quote here, and I don't know if it's too long. So let me read it to you. I've been trying to put the quote up for the last 5 minutes, and that's why I was kind of behind there. But by the way, welcome back to the Steakhouse. Dan Vaughn with you here on a Wednesday. We got a lot more to go here as the second half hour upon us. In case you did not see this, now Kevin just reached out to me, and I got his quote. He's telling me, Donna, that nothing but speculation, but to the ownership spot with Ottawa, it's possible he might own both teams. I think that's kind of where the Winnipeg, and look at the Winnipeg Sun, for example. This is all over the paper in Winnipeg this morning, and I did see this on Twitter last night, and it's in my show script. I didn't know if anybody was going to catch it, but it was in my script to talk about the second half, and I really appreciate you guys bringing that up. But and I would say most of the time our interviews are live, but that one was taped. And the quote from Stan Katz says, moving the team is clearly not off the table, according to the Winnipeg Sun at this point. But his quote was, realistically speaking, you always have options, Katz said. If things don't work out with the city council, there are all sorts of options. But the bottom line is I want baseball to stay in Winnipeg, and I want the Gold Eyes to stay in Winnipeg for a long time, but it's the council's hands, not in my hands. Now, for you folks throughout the American Association who do not follow Winnipeg closely, and I think a lot of us sort of are in the same boat, I know about this. This has been an ongoing thing. And according to the article, it says, I believe here somewhere in the article, it talks about they incurred about a 7-figure loss this year. You remember the Gold Eyes didn't play any home games at all. Everything was on the road. There was no home games, nothing, no merch. I mean, they sold merch, but no revenue coming in for the Gold Eyes from Gold Eye Baseball, except for other, there are other things possibly, but I don't know their books, of course. But they've been on a long-term. I don't think the word fight is the proper thing. They're at a standstill. They've drawn a line in the sand, and on one side is the Gold Eye ownership. The Gold Eyes, other side's the city council or the council there in Winnipeg. I think it's probably a twofold thing. I would think if you read the articles, reading the tea leaves, as Paul and I like to say in Australia, it looks like this is kind of, I think the first thing is you want to bring a team to Ottawa. Ottawa's a good baseball. Ottawa's a great sports market. I love going to Ottawa a couple years ago when the Can-Am League team had a team there, the AAA park. It's a huge park. There's an opportunity there in Ottawa. It's a large city. It's a cool city, a really cool place to go there in Ottawa, in Canada. And of course, it's way across the country from Winnipeg. I think, they'd like to put a team there. I think Katz could own both teams. That's not a problem. But I think this also does give him leverage against Winnipeg that if, hey, you know what, you don't want us to play, what that does to the American Association, I have no idea. but I would venture to guess there'd be some kind of juggling around down the road. But it does give him that option that, hey, if Winnipeg can't reach a deal with the city council of Winnipeg, that makes sense. But just seeing that quote and just seeing that it does, and hey, that's the nature of sports. I mean, we've been through this in Kansas City, and I would venture to guess as well, assuming they couldn't work out a deal in Winnipeg, that ballpark wouldn't sit idle for very long. I mean, maybe for maybe a year or two, but by and large, those ballparks just don't sit there idle, with the exception of maybe a Fort Worth. Maybe that's the one place that I've been wrong about that. But these things happen. I mean, cities and teams that negotiate. I mean, when the T-Bones were sold, one of the things that Mark Brandmeier and company had to do was work out a new lease with Wyandotte, with the unified government. And these things teams got to work out, and especially in a change. And Winnipeg's been there a long time, a great steward of the community. The Goldeyes mean a lot to that summer in Manitoba. I mean, I can tell you right now, having been there over the years, people are engaged with that ball club. They love that ball club. It's part of the fabric of what a Manitoban summer is about, is a Winnipeg Goldeye game. And I can't tell you how many times I've been in town and I've stopped off at a place to eat or lunch or whatever or anywhere, and they say, well, what are you doing in town? And I'm like, well, I'm here with the team playing the Goldeyes. They're like, oh, wow, oh, man, we're there tonight. Or whatever. It's a big deal, but it's still a business. And I think what they're doing makes sense. So to answer your question, maybe I've gone a long tangent here, but it makes sense. I would think this is for expansion down the road for Ottawa to be in either Atlantic, Can-Am / Frontier, whatever's now the Frontier there, or American Association, or leverage in case that Winnipeg can't work out something with the city, they got a place to play. So I think it's probably dual ownership is the first priority, but you still have that in the back of your bag there. Okay, glad you're along on a Wednesday. Questions or comments, always fire them away. Glad you're along. Yes, happy birthday to my wife. Got to catch. Glad you're here. Glad you guys are here. Let me pull up the broadcast here as well, as I do believe we are. Sorry about that. Thank you, by the way, Kevin, for reaching out. Oops, sorry about that. There we go. Glad you guys are along here on a Wednesday. A lot to get to still. Let's jump into what happened in Milwaukee and Sioux Falls the last fortnight. Congratulations to the Milwaukee Milkmen. They're champions of the American Association. By now, you guys have probably seen that. A lot of T-Bones connections, the Milk Bones, we've called them. Congratulations to those guys. As we talked about with Kevin, I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, that they were the best team. I mean, and no disrespect to Sioux Falls or anybody else, but Sioux Falls and listening to the broadcast, Sioux Falls knew it. I mean, they gave a heck of a fight, a great fight. They were a great ball club, but Milwaukee just had they checked all the boxes, and you're going to hear from Dylan Tyson a bit later. He talks about that. This team was super, and they definitely congratulations to the Milwaukee Milkmen. I won it last week. I took the series 4-1 last Thursday. David Holmberg, who's going back over to Australia again. This guy, he's your. I mean, if Tommy Collier does what Tommy Collier did at 18, he meant that to the T-Bones. This guy meant that to Milwaukee. I mean, he was that guy every fifth day. You knew you were going to get your 6-7, keep you in the ball game. You know, he was going to be there. And this is the guy you wanted starting your opener and in game 5. And he didn't get to a game 6 or 7. Milwaukee didn't get to go back home. They won it there in Sioux Falls over the course of of last Thursday. But let me give you guys a little some of the odds as we're talking a bit about the umpiring as well. You can see the umpires there as we open up the highlights of the association
Washington
final.
Swings a high fly to right. Coulter turning and looking, and that ball is long gone.
Winning it.
Solo
David Washington, solo home run early for
Milwaukee leads 1-0.
Good looking starter for the Sioux Falls
Driven to left center field, roaming back is Ryan Brett. He looks up, and that ball is long gone over the wall for a home run
as well. That's Logan Trowbridge.
Washington, it's a high fly to left. Ryan Brett heads back a few steps. It's maybe deep enough to score the run. Brett is underneath and makes the catch. Ty tags in third. The throw comes in. It won't be in time. Ty scores. Sacrifice fly to Bird
did get a hit off Holmberg.
Swing and a miss. Strike 3.
going
And the
into
Milwaukee
bottom of the eighth
Milkmen
inning.
are champions of the American Association 2020.
Really the big highlight for the Canaries.
And after this strange, challenging, and very rewarding 2020 season.
Come back, and we'll get to more of that in a moment. But the Canaries do drop it by a score 4-1 as Milwaukee wins it. There's your highlights of the association final game right there as the Milwaukee Milkmen win it. Final out here. I want to play this final out. I thought Carter Waddell did a really good job. Milwaukee, and we talked a bit about this. There was some talk. I was going to try to go up and call the game for Milwaukee on the radio side. They didn't have their own broadcast. I couldn't make it work. I had a commitment with my family. I just couldn't make work, and I need to be here for that. But I want to give you guys the final out here. I thought Carter did a really good job. The final out. Let's go ahead and play that for you guys, courtesy of the American Association and courtesy of the Sioux Falls Canaries and the league website. Let's play the final out here. Oops, try it again here. There we go.
Pitches. Swing and a miss, strike 3. And the Milwaukee Milkmen are champions of the American Association 2020. And after this strange, challenging, and very rewarding 2020 season, the journey ends here for the Sioux Falls Canaries. The Milkmen, in their second year of existence, reign supreme in the association. And it is heartbreak for Sioux Falls tonight. They fall in Game 5. Adam, this was a memorable series, a memorable season. In the end, the Milkmen were the better team.
Yeah, great all-around performance by the Milkmen. They were one of the top teams this entire season. That pitching staff just kept on propelling them to wins, and their bats got it done when they needed to. Congratulations.
Yeah, right there. That's courtesy of the Sioux Falls Canaries broadcast and also the American Association. You saw the logo at the bottom, and appreciate Carter and Adam. They're great work right there, and it's tough. I mean, and he was calling the game for basically both audiences, and to it's tough when your team doesn't win it. And I thought he handled it very well. I can't sit here and tell you as a veteran that I'd have been very graceful. Gracious is the word in defeat, but very good stuff right there. But yeah, big time. Of course, it's not the big celebration for those Milkmen and their fans. You see some of the highlight video right here of the post-game celebration there in Sioux Falls. And of course, the commissioner and the president of the league right there passing up the trophy to ownership, and really good stuff right there. Zach Nerier was named the Finals MVP. No argument right there. Just overall, Milwaukee's first American Association title, joined the league a year ago, their inaugural season in 19. They went 38-62 a year before, and missed the playoffs, but this year the best record, 34-26. And see the celebration. Let the celebration begin as the Milkmen definitely get the celebration in. And congratulations to Milwaukee for what they did. I couldn't. There's again, like I said this for you guys before, I have no argument with anyone. It didn't matter who was going to win this thing this year. It didn't matter to me. I mean, I think because, and you see that this is kind of fun. Those Milton folks are celebrating there in Milwaukee. Good on them. There's the Milwaukee faithful. But I had no issue with any team winning this year. I really didn't. I think that this year, because, I mean, usually, when we lost to Sioux City last year, I was in the dumps. I mean, I was hoping St. Paul would beat Sioux City. I got to admit. I mean, Sioux City got the better of us, and I love Steve Montgomery. I love those people up there, but it hurt. I mean, but this year, I don't. I mean, in